evening. Chairman William, members of the Border Historical Society, it is my pleasure to address you tonight on a topic close to my heart, the Ross Infant's Tombstone at Old Lovedale on the Ncera. The search for Old Lovedale Mission and the first inscription of isiXhosa on stone, a notable historical artifact. My talk tonight is about the search for a stone, a tombstone, somewhere on the veld in the foothills below the western flank of the Amatola Mountains, somewhere below Hogsback near Alice. The tombstone is not a memorial to any of my ancestors. It commemorates 3 little infants who died between 1825 and 1828. The interesting thing about this stone is that it is inscribed entirely in the Xhosa language in 1838, at a time when this ancient and beautiful language was only just beginning to be transformed from something that existed in the mind and on the wind into the written word, printable, inscribable. In this sense, then, it is indeed an ancestor of isiXhosa. A search like this is for us hobbyist historians just the very thing we most enjoy doing, a challenge, a good reason to escape onto the veld fossicking in the wild, an excuse, legitimizing an indulgence. This is a picture of John Ross. For context, a very brief history of the reduction of this language to the written word is provided. This monumental service was undertaken by the early missionaries, to whom a great debt is due. Beyond that, no attempt is made to enter into the debate involving the role of the missionaries. Some years back, reading the book published in 1940 to commemorate the centenary of the Lovedale Institution, I came upon this most tantalizing reference. On the site of the former, now always referred to as Old Lovedale, some ruined walls may be traced amid enveloping prickly pear. But down by the Ncera stream, the traveller comes upon a tombstone standing solitary on the veld. It bears an inscription wholly in Xhosa, which, when translated, reads, "There lie in this place the bodies of 3 children of John Ross, who was one of the missionaries here at Ncera, and of his wife Helen Ross. Died Margaret Ross, 1825. Died Richard Ross, 1828. Died John Ross, 1828. There follows a biblical text ending with, "There came a sound from heaven saying, 'Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord.'" 1838. A footnote by Dr. R.H.W. Shepherd, Principal of Lovedale and author of Lovedale, South Africa, 1841 to 1941, on page 69 notes that the Xhosa inscription is probably the earliest anywhere. Ever since reading this, I have longed to see this stone for myself. An inscription in isiXhosa on stone dated 1838 is akin to the holy grail of that language, surely. So then, what do we know of isiXhosa in 1838? until the early missionaries in Xhosa land undertook the mammoth task of recording it in script. This ancient and beautiful language had simply floated in the wind and lived in the mind. The Wesleyans laboured among the tribes along the eastern seaboard of southern Africa, while the Church of Scotland broke ground around the Amatolas. At Chumi, Ross and Benny printed 50 copies of this alphabet on the 19th of December 1823. Sheets of spelling lessons followed on from Ross's printing press. In April 1824, the first work printed in the Xhosa language, Incwadi yokukugala ekutetheni ngokwamaXhosa, a booklet containing spelling lessons and prayers prepared by Ross, Thompson, Brownlee and Benny, appeared. Benny prepared a large vocabulary and attempted reducing the language to form and rule. An extended type of alliteration gave the language a baffling euphony, that is to say, a pleasantness of sound, especially of a word or phrase. Now, at the time Chief Faku of the Amapondo requested a missionary, he was resident on the Mgazi River below Insimbini. The Wesleyans were augmented at about the same time by a man particularly gifted in languages. In 1829, Reverend W.B. Boyce established the first mission to the Amapondo on land allocated by Faku on the Dangwana stream. It was quite waterless. Faku allowed the mission to move west to the Mgazana. While he quipped, he knew the Dangwana was waterless. He thought these men of God could make their own rain. So it was, near the waterfalls on the Mgazana River at the second sighted Buntingville mission, that Boyce worked on the Xhosa grammar. His superintendent, Reverend William Shaw, had arranged to assist this task by this means. The son of the Morley missionaries was by now thoroughly fluent in isiXhosa, but he required a formal education which Boyce could provide. Young Theophilus Shepston would share his Xhosa with Boyce. Boyce recorded and tabulated all the Xhosa words and sentences he was given. Strolling up and down outside his door one evening in 1831, it suddenly all fell into place. Before the end of 1833, he had produced for printing the first Xhosa grammar. He named the key he had discovered the euphonic concord. And so we return to the search for our tombstone. How does one set about finding a solitary tombstone set upon the African veldt nearly 2 centuries ago? The reference is quite clear, down by the river below the old mission. Problem was that nobody could say where the Old Lovedale site lay exactly. To find the stone, one had to narrow down the field by finding the mission first. In November 1824, Ross and Benny settled on Ncera, a tributary of the Chumi River. The site was carefully chosen some 12 miles or so to the southeast of Chumi Mission. When the mission was destroyed in 1835, it was re-established on its present site some 4 miles west of the Old Lovedale. Consulting the standard 1 in 50,000 map, one sees that the R63 crosses the Ncera just before the turnoff to Hog's Back. The Ncera from its sources to the junction with the Tumi runs for some 8 kilometers over the map. But with meanderings, this distance can be doubled or perhaps even tripled. 12 miles or so southeast of the Mgwali Tumi mission, measured on horseback in the 1820s, is a guesstimate at best. Nevertheless, it is possible to form a good impression of where a suitable mission site might be. In 2018, I approached a few people I felt might be able to help me locate Old Lovedale. Carl Vernon of the East London Museum felt sure it was not far from where the Ncera intersected the main road to Alice. He, together with Jules Vernon and Jeff Pyries, had searched for the site some time back, and although they were convinced they were in the correct area, their search had not been successful. Trevor Webster of Hog's Back was most encouraging in emphasizing the search was a worthy endeavor. A local historian at McFarlane Mission, Mrs. Winnie Manelli, was unable to help and in fact unaware of the tombstone. It was Donald Davies who, when told of the stone, declared there was nothing to do but go and look for it. Thus enthused, we set our minds to it. On the 3rd of November 2019, this fellow Philip Fossicker and I set off and travelled as far as we could get down a track towards the upper third of the Ncera. We spent half a day walking through thorn scrub down the west bank of the Ncera looking for a prominent stone. The trouble was, the veld was brown, the bush was brown, the stones were brown, and there were hundreds of them. Worst of all, we were not even sure what our stone looked like. We had a great day on the veld. We believed we had found the likely site of the Old Lovedale, not far from the ruins of a settler farmhouse, Napier Park. But quite possibly the tombstone had been lost in raging floodwaters or perhaps vandalized. So it was back to the books and maps again. It then transpired the mission was on the east bank of the Ncera, if an old military map by Captain Javois found in Corey, Rise of South Africa, Volume 3, was to be believed. We had been searching the wrong side of the Ncera Donga. It was hoped there might be an archive record of the exact site of Old Lovedale at Fort Hare University. Inquiries, however, were fruitless, possibly because of the lockdown and inaccessibility of libraries and archives. On the 18th of July 2020, Mandela Day, 3 Border Historical Society Fossickers set off to follow a dirt road towards a likely site on the east bank of the Ncera. William Martinson had joined the search. On arrival, we split up and scanned the hillside to its summit. On returning to our vehicle, I stumbled upon the unmistakable stone foundations of a large building some 10 meters from where I had parked. This was, without any doubt, the Old Lovedale we hoped to find. And here are some photos of that. Now I was really keen to get down to the riverside, but my companions, the architect and the engineer, were bent on measuring every detail. During this delay, a friendly man from the nearest village came to inquire after our business. He had not the slightest knowledge of the Old Lovedale we had just rediscovered. But, seeing our excitement, and perhaps to compensate for this lapse, before I could even inquire, he volunteered that he did know of a funeral stone down by the river. And with that, Zingisile Gladman Lumka led us straight to it. And there's the stone. The burial site at Old Lovedale was well chosen. The Ncera stream or dry riverbed makes a loop at this point so that the grave lies on a tongue of land almost surrounded by the watercourse. Today it lies in the dense shade of trees and provides a most tranquil situation suitable for restful contemplation. William Martinson Googled the area. It is quite astonishing to note the river loop forms the left half of the heart symbol. The boundary is formed to complete the right half of the image. William then researched the Surveyor General's records and found this title deed map dated 1861. The academic most authoritative on the Glasgow missions in the Amatolas is the Senior Research Associate, Corey Library, Rhodes University. Dr. Sandra Rowold-Schell is now resident in Cape Town. Sandy recently had published by HIPSA, previously Van Riebeeck Society, the journals of James Lang, missionary at Burns Hill. In it, she has a picture of Mrs. Margaret Lang's tombstone, inscribed in isiXhosa as being among the earliest examples. This publication appeared after my search for the Ross tombstone had begun. I contacted Dr. Schell with news of our discovery, and she responded enthusiastically with great detail from the Ross letters, which are in preparation for publication. Details of the 3 infants buried at Lovedale are Margaret, born 11th of February 1824, died 29th of April 1825, of whooping cough. Richard, the first of twins, Bryce being his fellow twin, born 12th of the 8th, 1825, and died 18th of December 1827. Incidentally, this illustrates that both Shepherd in his book and the mason on his stone have made a mistake. John, born 1st of March 1827, died 16th of January 1828. Further interesting detail derived from Lang's journal from Sandy is the record on Friday the 8th of December 1837 that, accompanied by the Reverends Mr. Brownlee and Mr. Niven, Lang went to Fort Wilshire in order to procure a stone for Mrs. Lang's grave. The inscription on the Lang and Ross stones was crafted by the same artisan without doubt. I believe it is safe to deduce these gentlemen placed an order for both these stones on the same occasion, and both were completed and erected in 1838. Sandy has agreed to address us on the subject in Hog's Back, where, as soon as it is possible to lift restrictions, all interested people will gather for a celebratory tour from Hog's Back to Tombstone Mission site, then to Old Lovedale site, then to Burns Hill, and finally culminating in a visit to Lovedale Institution. All interested persons are more than welcome to join this occasion, and this is tentatively planned for October this year, 2021. I thank you for your patience in listening via Zoom and hope the transmission came through clearly. Thank you.